Hello, my name is Christopher Carithers, and for my CS680 software engineering project, I have done a text-based role-playing game. In this game, a user will be able to explore a world, and they'll be able to fight monsters, they can flee from them, be able to level up, find new equipment to better themselves, and be able to start the game, load the game, or save the game. So, the first process of creating this project was coming up with user stories. For coming up with user stories, I use several techniques such as brainstorming, just writing down whatever I could come up with at the beginning, and then I have a friend that's also a gamer, and we did something like role-playing where I would act like the software and he would describe what he would want me to do. This helped get those user stories out, which I have listed right here in this document called Project User Story Carithers Christopher. It's a PDF document. The next part was the project estimation, which I would try to come up with how long I would think to finish that user story for the project. Along with coming up with project estimation, I also included velocity, because I have other classes to work on as well as job and outside of class with family and friends. So with the velocity included, I have came up with this iteration plan which includes 4 iterations. I knew I wasn't going to get them all done. I knew I was going to get at least up to 2 of them. The first 2 iterations were coming up with the menu screen, being able to start a new game. The player would be able to move around the map, such as going north, south, east, or west, and then they would be able to flee from a monster if they find one. The second iteration was coming up with the options menu, wielding a weapon, attack the monster, and be able to check some items in your backpack. So these are the user stories that I came up with. Next part was trying to figure out where I would store this. I used a Git repository on my local machine, and then I cloned it over to Google Code as backup in case my computer were to fail. And then, after the user stories, was coming up with the diagrams. Now I would do, for each user story, I would add on to the diagrams. For instance, here's the class diagram. As you can see, the play game is the main one that starts up. Then we have association with one player, which the player has a backpack, which in the backpack you can look up the weapon, and of course the weapon, it has an interface with item. Later there would be like potions, which would be interface with item, but would also be separate from backpack, or from the weapon, but inside the backpack. The player is sort of like a being, so monster and player should share some functions. And then we have the menu option, which the user menu would have many different menu options. So you could choose from the option on the menu. Then we have the buffered reader, which would read from a map.dat file in order to load in the map and display it for the user. And this is the class diagram. Also, there is the sequence diagram. As you can see, we'll start play a game. The menu will be created first. Then the user should be able to select from the menu. Once they select from the menu, they will be created. And I went ahead and added a default weapon, such as a bronze sword, and they should be able to continue the game. Depending on what option they choose, they can move around the map, go in north direction, and then if they find a monster there, they can flee or attack. So this right here is the class diagram. Of course, before going through this, I did a lot of object-oriented analysis, which I actually had to think how the world, what's the difference between how the software will work and the real world. So first I would think how the real world would look. So there's like someone just walking around the world. Well, similar, there's a player class that will walk around this map. So that's how I was starting to think about it. Which the main parts in doing this project is coming up with the diagrams. If I had a lot of that planned out ahead of time, it was a lot easier to implement. What was interesting to me was coming up with user stories on what techniques to use. Also, was a critical part is looking for packages that could be used to save time, which I didn't really want to do it this time, but for a later project I would. Other software engineering concepts I used was like using Eclipse as the editor and compiler, and I linked it to my Git repository. Now I did want to try to stay with high cohesion and low coupling, which I did. For one example would be the user menu and menu option. The menu option would have categories like the title of the menu, what number in the position in the menu, and other things like that. And then the user menu will actually create the whole menu from those menu options, which in the menu options, the variables are private from the user menu. And then the user menu is private from the actual play game, as you can see. So here's the play game class, and I'll start this up to show you what it looks like. So we'll run it. So we can look at the options screen real fast, and it just gives you a brief description of what this game is about and what to do. You can exit the game, but we'll start a game up real fast. So we'll choose a name, so we can say hero, and then just give you some showing that it's loading the map, and then you'll want to press continue onward. As you can see, there's the map that's printed. P represents where the player is at, X's are where the monsters, and Y I have not come up with what Y would be yet, but the pipelines would be like walls or something like that. Now in order to move around, first, like if you want to go north, of course you can't go any more north, and it'll tell you that, but you can go south and go east, so you keep going east, and then you can also look at your backpack. Of course, I have two categories right there, weapons and armor. So I want to go to weapons. The armor one has not been initiated yet. That's another user story. And I say I have a bronze sword with me, which a weapon to fight any monster I want. So I want to wield it. So I wield. And you choose, since I only have one, so I'll choose one. And now the weapon is equipped. So if I go back to backpack, it should say equipped next to the item. Now I want to go back, and I'm back to the screen where the map is. Now I can keep on going east, and I'll run into a monster. So it'll tell you the spot is occupied, there's a monster there, should I attack or flee? Well, I try attacking. The attack system isn't fully operational yet because there's other user stories that will deal with calculating how much you'll hit and different scenarios in that part. So it's sort of implemented but not fully implemented. And I'll tell you get ready to fight, and the goblin, what the goblin is description of. And then now you can also flee. So if I go east again, I go back to the monster, and then I can flee, and then it says you have run away. So then I can keep moving around And that's pretty much what I have so far for the game. This is a very large project, and usually a game would take quite a bit more iterations than just 2. Now for this project, I have learned quite a bit. Everything that I learned in the class was useful for creating this project. Now, I would say the most useful stuff would be the class diagrams and sequence diagrams. The things that I would have done differently before starting the project would be, if I would have known more about design patterns, I would try to study up on those harder, and hopefully it would save me time in coming up with new ideas for the project. And that is my project, and in that document that I'll be sending on Blackboard, we'll have the location of the URL on Google Code.